Welcome to the Connectivity Podcast. This is Paul Neville, this is Troy, and this is Sam Fortner. And today, this is the first one we've done. And because it's Christmas time, we are going to talk about Christmas.
Wow, how fitting.
I love Christmas.
Me too. I love Christmas. I've been celebrating Christmas for 50 years now.
You have us both beat.
I feel like I've been celebrating Christmas my whole life.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I like how she didn't put a number on that.
Yeah, we can tell Paul is just that much more about Christmas because he asked us to bring a Christmas sweater, and this is what we came up with. And
This is my Christmas sweater.
Yeah, it just...
This is the elf on the magic mushroom Christmas sweater.
I guess I didn't look at it that hard.
Now, if you notice the red mushroom with the white dots you see in a lot of Christmas art, especially older Christmas art, those are magic mushrooms that grow naturally in Europe. And that's how the reindeer fly. They feed the mushrooms to the reindeer, and then the reindeer can fly.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to know how Santa makes the reindeer fly, it's the magic mushrooms in Europe that do that.
Perfect.
As a future physician, I have to say, do not eat any magic mushrooms from Europe.
But the good thing, they're not the same as American magic mushrooms, and they will make you sick before you eat too many of them to cause medical problems. They'll make you barf. So
okay.
you don't have to OD. You can't OD on them.
Good.
So Christmas, what's something that that was important for you guys growing up celebrating Christmas? Any good memories, bad memories? If you have like Gremlins memories, you can leave those ones. We want to keep it more lighthearted.
No terrible memories. No like, oh, well, Santa's elves were on strike this year, like kind of stories. I know like a lot of people have. But normally for me, Christmas thing that gets me kind of excited is just seeing like family I don't see like a year round because we're kind of disparate. We're kind of spread out. So the family that is able to make it out or vice versa, if I'm going out to meet them, that's kind of the more exciting part of it all for me anyways.
How about you, Sam?
Well, for me, my family has done the same thing every year for as long as I've been alive. But it's really interesting because the past, 7 or 8 years, pretty consistently, we've been having new family members added. For example, my brother just had a baby this year. So it's really fun to see our family group grow. And now that Troy's part of the family too, and we're just growing slowly but surely. And so that's really cool to see.
Now, for me, growing up, Christmas was in lots of different places. Lots of different places here in America. It was in Phoenix and Prescott and in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the Philippines, Singapore, California, and now back here to Arizona. So in those places, we've had lots of, it would be family would come and future family. That's how I met we'd spend a lot of time with my wife at Christmas time. When she was a little brat, she would be over with us at Christmas time. But over the years,
don't worry, she'll never watch this.
That's the best memories is all the time spending together with people, with friends and family and stuff. What about food? What's your first thing that comes to your mind with Christmas for food?
Tamales.
Tamales?
Fans can kill me. Pizza. because
what's a Christmas pizza?
no one wants to cook.
What's a Christmas pizza?
Pizza Hut is a Christmas
Papa
pizza.
John's?
Yeah, Papa John's, whatever is open.
Whatever's open.
Because if we're not going out to family or family's not coming to us, then we're definitely not cooking. Or we're doing pizza. It's either pizza or it's like very close to what you would consider like a Thanksgiving dinner. So probably like turkey and mashed potatoes.
If I tried to do pizza.
Oh,
I mean, tamales you just throw in the microwave for 2 minutes. So, I mean, is that really any better than pizza?
Oh, man.
Well, you can usually only get them at Christmas. That makes them special.
Good point.
I haven't had any tamales yet this time of year.
If you can find somebody selling them in a parking lot, it's the best place to buy tamales.
I agree, but my wife won't let me buy stuff from random people in parking lots. I'll be driving down the road and there's somebody set up with a little Easy Up in their truck, and they'll have like Navajo tacos, and I'm like, oh, cool, Navajo tacos. And she's like, you're not buying that off from somebody in the parking lot. That stuff's been sitting there for hours. It's like, but where else am I going to get those? I don't make them at home.
True.
Good point. In my hometown, it's tamales and oranges. So
I mean, that's how I got my cat. Just had a laundry basket out of a parking lot, and look at how she turned out. She's the meanest thing you've ever met. So maybe she's onto something.
It's okay. She won't watch this either.
One thing that I miss the most about Christmas, for instance, this year is actually a recent memory, which is the Christmas markets in Germany. I miss those so much. We don't have over there. Every city has these massive Christmas markets that they put up downtown, and the little towns will have one just like for 1 or 2 weekends, but the bigger cities, you have this all month long. And it's like, the German version of like the carnival food that you get only at Christmas time. And you go and they have the hot punch and the hot chocolate, and just make sure you get the right one that's hot because of the temperature, not because of all the alcohol that's in it. And some of those, I think they got so much alcohol you could light a fire on top of the hot chocolate. And they have places where they're like smoking like salmon just right there over the fire, and they'll take it and put it in a sandwich. And it's I miss that the most over here.
Yeah, it's almost like a flea market type.
Oh look, somebody's calling. It's Santa.
Santa Claus, is that you?
We're not cutting any of this. Nothing's getting cut. I'm calling it right now.
No cutting.
No cutting.
We're having a Christmas party in a little bit, and that's our ham. They're calling to tell me that the ham is ready to get picked up.
Definitely not me putting my phone on Do Not Disturb.
Yes, I know. Me too. There we go.
Being in school, my phone is on vibrate 24/7.
Hello, this is Paul.
Tell her she's on the podcast.
I'd just like it to be known that this is our host answering a phone call mid-podcast.
Yes, hang on. I'll tell him right now. Thank you.
About ham.
Sorry, this is not something I can hand off to anybody.
Ham.
No, it's fine. I told her to tell her she's on a podcast.
Oh, that would have been funny, huh?
Hello, ma'am. What does Christmas mean to you?
Hey, Bruce, can you turn around and go back? They were supposed to give you a pecan pie too.
So is it like a flea market, or is it just like food?
Not flea market.
Or like a farmer's market, more.
It would be, it'd be more like a farmer's market. There's crafts, there's handmade stuff. There's lots of Christmas stuff. Like you go there, you're going to be able to buy ornaments. You're going to be able to buy like the most amazing Christmas village you've ever seen, but it's going to be like handmade kind of quality stuff. All kinds, like there's like, you'll have this one big booth, and all it is like handmade leather stuff that somebody makes, or one that's it's all like handmade wood stuff, cutting boards and things like that somebody's making. Somebody else, there'll be one shop that all they have is brushes, everything from like shaving brushes to hair brushes, but everything's like handmade, with like boar bristle brushes and stuff like that. Even from like that kind of brushes all the way to like, something you're going to use in your garage to clean the floor or something. Yeah. So, and food.
Yeah. Unlike us in the States,
food.
when we order something, we don't even know, like from Amazon, we don't even know what size it's going to come. Like,
right.
You think it's like a full size thing, and it's like, it's made for a dollhouse. It's like this big.
My favorite
that's
ones
why it was $10 cheaper.
Are the, what they call the Mittel Alta markets. And those are the Middle Ages. So it'll be like it's a medieval market. And so you'll have some of the same things, except it's older. So you'll have like a blacksmith there that's actually making things, and you can buy, like they'll have like, someone's got like a spice shop with all kinds of tea and stuff. There's one spot that we would go to every year, and they had this giant pot of like Himalayan style chai that they would just have going all day long. And then they had a room that was next to their shop that you could go inside, and they had a wood stove and stuff in there, so you could sit inside because it's so cold outside. And there was someone else that sells like the medieval clothes, but it's all like they'd have a medieval band up there. So they have those sections like that are just really cool.
Yeah, that sounds
really
awesome.
cool.
Do they take posed pictures? Just like down here in Arizona, they take those like Southwestern cowboy pictures. You dress up in medieval.
Take their own. They don't. That would be probably a good idea. I bet you somebody could make a lot of money if they had the clothes and they had a photo booth where you could put them on. But they're selling those clothes like for people to keep. So what about you? What is something that you miss the most at current Christmases?
Oh, I was talking about this before we started, but when I was a lot younger, I was raised Catholic, and my family on Christmas Eve, we would always go to a Christmas Eve service, and that service was specifically for the youth of our church, and they would get up there with like really weird maracas that didn't sound like maracas, and like tambourines that didn't click at all. They would just made sound, and they would sing all the songs, so it'd be like a children's service. And then several years ago, that priest that we had passed away, and the new priest that got put in, he didn't want to continue the tradition, so we don't go anymore.
It's a bummer.
But it's a super big bummer because it was so much fun to see all the kids have a good time, and they just knew it was Christmas, and they were so excited to open presents the next day. let's be honest. But they all were there at church and having a grand old time. And that was so much fun, but we don't go anymore. And that's what I miss the most.
What about you, Troy?
I'd say just the way my family has panned out, that all the kids have kind of grown up. And so we have even the couple of kids that were like my niece and nephew. Now they're like teenagers now. So it's because you come to a point where you know, okay, I'm never going to experience Christmas like I did as a kid. Everyone comes to that, but you're like, okay, but I can at least give that kind of Christmas to, to like a younger generation from your family and things like that. And what's nice is that her side of the family has a lot of kids, so it was fun to see them like open up presents and stuff. But a lot of Christmases now, we're all adults. We're like, please don't buy us anything. We're gonna have like we're gonna do like a gift card exchange, and that's not as fun. But at the same time, you get it. It's more for the kids in that case too.
No, we love getting presents for the kids because they get so excited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For us, we just want to be together with each other. That's the part that we enjoy the most. And so we
absolutely
miss out on those things. My oldest daughter is in Iowa, and so she's a long ways away. And we don't get to see her this year. But thankfully we have FaceTime and stuff like that we can do, so we can be able to see her at least that way.
Yeah.
Christmas is such a big thing. We have so many different traditions and things that we have here in America, like the Christmas tree over here behind us, and we know that these traditions came from all over. But when I was in Germany, I was amazed to find out that almost all of the traditions that we celebrate here in America of what it means, what Christmas means, they come from Germany. Most of our Christmas carols come from Germany, and the Christmas tree, we get that through Germany. The way that the Santa Claus, what Santa Claus looks like to us, St. Nicholas, how he looks to us, that comes from Germany. And there's traditions that we have that are, it was just amazing being over there and finding out how many of these things come from there. I've seen some pictures forever of, the elves and stuff and the mushrooms, like the mushroom here and things in Christmas pictures, but it didn't mean anything until you go over there and you go for a walk in the woods and they're growing, right? The mushrooms are growing there in the woods and they're in all the pictures over there. And just to be around that stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that so much of our traditions came from Germany.
I think like a lot of things in America, we take ownership over things.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because of how multicultural we are, multinational, that it's easy to say, oh no, this started here. This came from here, whatever. But it's a lot of people that brought that to America. So, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, other than like, Thanksgiving Day and like Columbus.
4th of July.
Yeah, exactly. Those like super American holidays are like, where we expect everyone else in the globe to have that off. It's like, our partners in China don't have this off. And it's like, well, yeah, it's the 4th of July.
They get like 2 weeks off for Chinese New Year.
That's true. We should adopt that then. Forget about the 4th of July. Let's do that.
I had a friend in California that worked at the post office. And he went to work one day, I think it was like in February, and they told him, what are you here for? You've got vacation. Like, what are you talking about? It's Chinese New Year. And he was American. I mean, he happened to be, he was Chinese, but he was born in America and everything. So he was like, oh, okay. So he went home for 2 weeks. He got a holiday that they gave to him because it was like, they thought it was culturally his holiday.
Oh, goodness.
When I was a kid, there was this book that came out. It was called Mystery Babylon, Mother of Harlots. And it was about how basically everything that we celebrate in the West is from the devil and comes all the way from back in Babylon. So you shouldn't celebrate anything basically. You shouldn't celebrate Easter. You shouldn't celebrate Christmas. You shouldn't celebrate your birthday. You shouldn't celebrate any of that stuff because it's all the devil. And so I was a kid. I remember there was one time I was in the mall, and I think it was at a Christian bookstore. It might have been a Hallmark store, they have little Precious Moments and stuff. And there was one of those, it was probably a Precious Moments where you have Santa Claus is like kneeling down in front of the manger, but the baby Jesus in it. And I remember seeing that, and there was like a couple old ladies came up, and they're like, "Oh, isn't that so cute? You know, Santa Claus is praying to Jesus." And they like, "Don't you think that's cute?" And I was like, "No, Santa Claus killed Christians," because I was a reader and I had read that book, and so you know, I
You were
was
just in the holiday spirit that
Those
day.
poor old women.
I freaked out those poor old ladies. I know that, but I'm glad that my family never stopped putting up the Christmas tree and never stopped celebrating those things
Yeah.
into that. And as I've gotten older, I found out that you know, a lot of the stuff in that book isn't true, and it's really old. So a lot of their sources and their information is just extremely out of date. And today, you know, nobody that does any kind of research would believe that stuff. But people still get that old book and they cite it as reasons why they don't want to celebrate Christmas
Yeah.
and why they don't want to celebrate anything. It's terrible. So
Well, it's interesting because, you know, Christmas is just like Easter. Like it's a good time to invite people to get back into the church. Like, you know, you have family over. Well, you invite them to church. You know, it's like we're going to have church on Sunday at our church here at Living Hope. And, you know, you'd hope, okay, there's family coming in. There's people that haven't been to church in a few years. This is just another opportunity to, you know, to get them in the door. So it's always funny to me when people want to separate Christmas versus, you know, like what, you know, from the church. And from a mindset stance, that's probably healthy to do. Like, you know, like this is about the birth of Jesus and reflecting on what that meant for humanity and stuff. But on the other side of the fence, whatever you say, you can edit this. The other side of the fence, like it's just an opportunity to use Christmas to spread the gospel and, you know, and even just be more generous. Like there's always those people ringing bells.
Yep.
You know, Salvation Army is out there. I was just telling Sam the other day, I'm like, man, I should get with the Salvation Army and show them what tap is, you know, like on the card, like just put a tap on those little bells, you know, like no one's carrying around cash. I feel bad because I walk by those.
That's true.
I walk by those and no one carries change my age.
That is true.
And it's not that we're less generous than like another generation. It's just that we literally do not have a lot of cash. We have Apple Pay, we have Google Pay.
That's a good idea. You should talk to Salvation Army.
I know. Let's get that set up. Just put a
Salvation Army, we're coming for you.
But yeah, it's just always funny because I just read a report the other day too that there's I think it's in somewhere in Europe, but like a college is saying like you can't put up Christmas like lights, can't put up Christmas decorations, can't use the word Christmas because it's attached to, you know, like the religious holiday. So they want to completely separate it. And then you hear people in the church that want to completely separate it too, but for the totally different reason. You just gotta sit there and be like, why is that? Why, you know, we want to, that's how we bring non-believers in, is we don't reject the holiday and been like, you know, like, oh, you believe in Santa Claus? Like that's
My wife believes in Santa Claus.
Oh, well,
Don't tell her.
There you go. Hopefully she gets everything she needs.
Usually,
Good thing she's
every
not
year
listening
she
to
does.
this.
So that she doesn't tell anybody what she wants, and every year she gets it.
Yeah,
Santa Claus gets it. Now, with what you're talking about, what you were just talking about in Singapore, you would see that because pretty much every holiday that's out there is either say nationalistic or political, or it's religious. We celebrate national things, right? The 4th of July, things like patriotic things, right? And then we celebrate religious holidays. That's what holidays are. They're there because of religion. And Singapore is a very multicultural place. It's predominantly majority Chinese. And then after that, the rest of the population is divided between, Europeans, Malaysians, and Indians. And so they all have their different holidays, but they're religious holidays. So there's a lot of Muslims. So Ramadan is a big holiday every year. Then the Hindu holidays are big every year. Chinese New Year is a huge holiday, and Christmas. And they expect Christians to be doing things about Jesus at Christmas. Yeah. So you have much more leeway as a church in Singapore to do any kind of outreaches or anything you want to do at Christmas time compared to the rest of the year because this is your Christian season to celebrate. They expect you to be doing events for this season. And they expect you to be talking about Jesus because that's what the whole holiday is for.
Yeah.
And it's religious. You can have a Christmas parade and you can have Jesus and all kinds of stuff in it because that's what the purpose of the holiday is.
And it's so integrated, like, during work, and they've just been putting on Christmas music, like, 8 hours a day, every day. And, I would say maybe about a 50-50 split, whether those are religious songs or they're Christian, but these are being played on like a secular radio.
As long as they don't play Last Christmas.
And it's funny, if you in a
tired of that.
The song plays every other.
It is like every 6 songs, let me tell you. But it's just interesting to me if you were to go into my office space and put on like Christian radio, like at least one person in there would be like, no, we're not doing this. Like, but you put on Christmas music and, it's playing, like Silent Night, like all those
Which
religious
came from
songs.
Germany.
Which came, of course. The moral of the story, it all came from Germany. But yeah, it's just interesting that, like you said, people are just more willing to it just puts them in a more giving spirit and they're more willing to listen, because we were out the other day on what's it called?
Winter Haven?
Winter Haven.
Festival of Lights.
Where's Winter Haven?
It is on the west. Is it west side of town?
It's here in
Up by
Tucson?
the university here.
Okay.
By the University of Arizona here in Tucson. And they put it on every year. And there's, probably over 1,000 people there every night just walking the streets.
So that part of town is called Winter Haven?
Yeah, it's a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood called Winter Haven.
It's really
but
cool.
Every year, the people in that neighborhood are under contract to use a minimum number of lights every Christmas because thousands of people come out and walk the neighborhood, just like going out and seeing Christmas lights, but on a much, much larger scale. And they do awards and stuff. And they have, gigantic displays, and
that's where the
really
Griswolds
cool.
should live.
Yeah,
pretty much. But I thought it was interesting. We did run into someone out there that was street preaching.
Really?
And, you hear stories out here that, people that street preach Story University, a lot of them are willing to talk and like converse and stuff. But you do get people that are yelling, like, giving them the finger, stuff like that. But we didn't sit there a long time, but you went by and people just seemed to accept it. They weren't being confrontational about it. It's just that time of year and it's a good opportunity to do that. So that was just like an example of it I saw recently. I noticed because it's right by the university, and usually that's a pretty hostile place to do something like that. We have someone, a guy in our church that brings a truck down and does that. His name's Jerry, and he has fun. He has good stories every week. He goes over there.
Then he puts a big TV in the back of his truck, then puts slides up there, right?
Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah,
about Jesus loves you and things like that.
I feel like a lot of people they seem to be more open to listening around Christmas time, and I'm not sure if it's that spirit of giving that kind of overcomes a lot of the negative emotions. Because this is America. There's been a lot of negative emotions floating around for quite some time, but I feel like every Christmas it just becomes a lot more pleasant around here. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but I feel like people, they embrace just kind of like this giving attitude, and the New Year's coming. So they're like, I'm going to have a better year next year. I'm going to be happier next year. And I don't know what it is, but they seem more open to hearing what people have to say. Yeah.
And if we could, if somehow the church could take Christmas and translate that into the rest of the year,
Well, that's what we're supposed to do.
Christmas all year, every year.
Christmas all year, every year in the church, where we're talking about like this giving spirit and this like willingness to listen and stuff like that, and that goes the opposite way around too, where the church can seem more giving and more understanding around this time of year. And if the church could capture whatever that is we're talking about year round, because you were preaching today that, like the church, we should be the top of everything.
I agree.
We do. Like, we should be at the top of Hollywood. We should be at the top of music. And the reality is we're not.
No, we're not.
Not at all. Especially in those, in like
We've
the media
let go
world.
of a lot of these things
Yeah.
that I don't know what the reason was. Oops, if you're watching this, I'm sure you can comment about what the reason was. But the Catholic Church had all the arts, right? The
Right.
greatest art in history was done as part of the Catholic Church, and
Yeah.
it's because it's part of the worship. The art was part of the worship, whether it's a ceiling of a Sistine Chapel
Stained
or
glass
some of the
windows.
carvings or something. The stained glass. This was all part of worship, and the stained glass was part of presenting the gospel. Most of the windows are, it's that window is telling the story of one of the miracles of Jesus or something, right?
I mean, the church was scholarship back
Yeah.
then too. Those were the people that knew how to read and write. And,
Yep.
and
when the Reformation happened, that's when things changed.
Yeah.
Like you can go to in Europe, and you can tell in the old cathedral, if you walk in, is this a Catholic cathedral or a Protestant cathedral? Usually you can tell by the artwork, because when it became Protestant, they would take out the stained glass, and they might still have stained glass, but it's just going to have a pattern. It's not going to have the picture and stuff in there. There's not going to have the paintings on the walls of the saints or Jesus or anything like that. In order for them to preserve the art, there had to be something extremely exceptional about it. In Maulbronn, where we were, there's this giant crucifix, Jesus on the cross. It's probably like 13 feet tall or something. The whole entire thing was carved out of one rock. And so they preserved that. It's like, this is just too amazing. During World War II, they actually walled it in, like built a bunker inside the cathedral around this thing in case it got bombed, that it would survive, hopefully.
Right.
And so they preserved that because that's just like too amazing, of a work of art. But the rest of it, it's not there. And it's just, since then, today, that's the same thing. The Protestant stuff, which is what dominates over here where we are, you don't have that expression on the arts. Like everything that they do is like they don't lead and excel in any of those artistic things, whether it's classical arts or music or anything. They end up following what's popular rather than being really invested in the artistic things.
Yeah.
And that we should be in those things. We should be invested in that. Where we should be. I believe that creativity comes from the Holy Spirit. We should be where the arts are coming from. We should be leading those things, like you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because coming from like working in the church in an audio or video background, a lot of, if you go look up tutorials for different like music equipment, whether that be soundboards, switchers, PCs, OBS, a lot of those will be linked to churches.
Okay.
Because in the church realm, we almost throw a concert every week in a sense. Whether
right.
the scale varies on how big that is, but we need to get we're just very knowledgeable about that stuff, and that's like a field where we actually the church actually does lead. Like there's a music supplier called Sweetwater, and they have a issue of their magazine which is just supposed to sell you new equipment and stuff. They have it just for churches. And they send it to churches specifically because they know, the church, they're innovators in this area because we need to figure out a way to stream out stuff, and especially during the pandemic. The
church has all stepped up to start doing that.
Yeah.
During the pandemic.
No, they modernized in a large way that way, and it was more out of necessity than it was out of need. But if the church ever stepped up that way in anything, in like recording music or I know it's hard to like make blockbuster films in that way because the Christian church doesn't do things just for the pure reason of entertainment, so it wouldn't necessarily need to just be dry, like theology, but like The Chosen, like that's
very good.
You bring it
that's
up.
a good example.
That's a good example of being like having like tight theology, but also having like, it's a good show. Like it's well produced, and you can tell people that act and whatever happens behind the scenes, they know what they're doing.
Well, today we're at the place when it comes to, for instance, to all of those things, that you don't have to have a large budget to be able to have the quality. You did when I was a kid in the 70s. If you didn't have the Hollywood budget, it was impossible to have the physical Hollywood quality. You could have amazing actors if you could afford them, but you still didn't have the quality. You're still going to only be able to film at the highest Christian budget, you could film on like 16 millimeter film.
Soap opera cameras.
Really bad, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't like soap operas were the video, like the film was just really, you know, really low quality. But it's the same thing in music, right? If you in the 70s and even in the 80s, if you could have a good sound, if you had like an amazing guitar sound, you could get away with not being a good guitar player because you could have a better sound than anybody. Everybody, oh my God, that sound is so amazing. Same thing with the keyboard. If you had a DX7 and you could make that an amazing sound, every band would want to hire you because of the sound, right? And you could get away with not being as good of a player. But today, everybody can have an amazing sound. Everybody can have an amazing guitar sound. Everybody can have an amazing keyboard sound. Everybody can have an amazing sound system. But now it's back to the actual quality of the guitar playing, the actual quality of the singer, the actual quality of the songwriting that matters. So when it comes to something like The Chosen, the quality of the writing really shines because anybody can make something that visually looks that good.
Yeah,
you can buy a camera that'll record that good and spend less than $10,000.
Right.
You know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you're looking at spending $100,000.
Yeah,
And then the computers and stuff to edit it. Right, you go buy a $2,000 Mac and it's powerful enough to edit the movie.
True.
Can you tell these guys work with sound and video for like a living?
So the content is what I'm talking about. The content, the real creativity stuff is what's important today.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where we do need to shine because we have everything else. There's nothing to hold us back.
Yeah. And, and you talk about, like Christmas songs and them being, like have a Christian base, Christian lyrics. I'm just thinking of something for Gen Z, like the difference between like my generation, millennials, and Gen Z is a lot of them have come back to playing instruments again. There was a whole generation of kids that were not interested in learning guitar or piano.
Correct.
It was just it just wasn't a priority. And now Gen Z, I've noticed they've really picked up on that. They love playing guitar. They want to play the Stranger Things, like Metallica songs.
They want to play the
Like,
oldies.
and so, we have an opportunity in the church in our worship facilities is to really encourage kids to bring that talent forward. And thing is, these kids, they're better than like 80% of the adults I know that play guitar because they have all these resources. And so that's just like another area I think the church still has is we have a lot of opportunity to bring up like younger musicians.
And I think that's one place where the Protestant churches and the non-denominational churches have taken it farther than the Catholic Church. We talk about the Catholic Church embracing art a lot, but they kind of fell behind in the music standpoint. I know when I came in here for the first time, this church, and I saw an entire stage full of band equipment and everything like that, I was amazed. I was like, this doesn't look like a church to me because I'm used to a single box with a really ancient, out of tune piano, and that's it. And so we would have like an 83-year-old woman come in and play the piano that was out of tune. And my dad eventually started bringing in his own guitar and his own amp to try to bring it back to life. And it really didn't do much, but all of the Catholic churches I've been to have been really similar, where it's really just an old out of tune piano. Whereas a lot of these churches, now I've been to several of them, and you can tell they really put everything they have into their music in terms of worship. And I think that's really interesting to see where they've kind of shot ahead, and the Catholic Church kind of stuck to the more traditional, very choral Latin chants and things like that.
And I would say also, like, anything we can do as a church to give people in the church like discipleship opportunities, like we should jump on that. And sometimes you have to get creative because not everyone is a musician. Not everyone wants to come up on stage and talk into a mic. And so I feel like the church, maybe the thing the church needs to do to become innovative in is just become innovative on different ways to disciple people and give them a place within the church that's not just them sitting in the seat, give us some money, give us your tithe and offering, and we'll see you next week, and it, there are ways you can do that in like a traditional sense is, we can do potlucks, we can do fellowship, but I feel like the thing that really gets people involved in the church and ultimately makes them like interested in coming into like leadership themselves and becoming a larger part of that is getting them involved. And any way we can do that is great.
And I think that starts with outreach in general, which kind of brings us back to the Christmas season, because our biggest opportunity to get new people to start coming back is by catching their attention in the first place. And a lot of times that is when you drag along family members to church because it's Christmas and you've got to go to church on Christmas. I know, like, my brother when he was a teenager, he was the type who absolutely refused to go to church. And over the years, the only time we made him go was Christmas. And now he's, thinking about raising his kids in the church and things like that. And all we did was continue to bring him on Christmas. We didn't force anything down his throat, but Christmas was an opportunity for church to kind of sneak its way a little bit in and just bring that to more hearts than it would normally.
That's our one of the hopes for Christmas is that no matter how commercial Christmas gets, or no matter how much people are missing out on what's really important about Christmas, we can still go back to Jesus and remind people what Christmas is about, remind them the hope and the reason to celebrate, and they need something that's a reason worth celebrating. I was listening to an old podcast, because if I find some podcast I like, I usually like to go to the beginning and listen through it. And I was listening to some episodes from 2012, and 10 years ago is when the school shooting happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about how that after that shooting, that all over town, all the Christmas decorations came down. The town took the Christmas decorations down. People took Christmas decorations down because it just didn't seem worth celebrating after the tragedy they had. And what he was talking about, this is not a current podcast, this is one from 10 years ago, is that just shows how, for most people, Christmas doesn't have any depth. They're celebrating family, but then families fall apart, or they're celebrating, getting together. But if they can remember what Christmas is about and we're celebrating Jesus, then it doesn't matter how bad of something, a disaster happens around us, that gives us even more reason to celebrate that Jesus coming into the world, because that's the only hope we have. Jesus was God's answer coming into this world, that finally God was going to step in and start fixing the world like he had been promising. He was going to start with Jesus. And so all of these problems in the world, the only way they're going to get resolved is through Jesus. And ultimately when he returns, but right now through us, through the church, that we've got the ability to bring that light and remind people this is what it's about. The world is a horrible place, but Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the one that's going to be changing this world.
Yeah,
through us.
And you hear this, but it's true. Like Christmas, the Christmas season, like suicide rates spike like drastically, and it's like you said, not everyone has family that they can celebrate. No amount of turning Christmas radio or lights are going to give them joy in their lives. Like ultimately, it does come back to Jesus, and like we said earlier, it doesn't mean tear down all the lights.
No.
And, just keep up the one nativity scene and that's that. It's not about that. It's just about reminding people why we're doing it ultimately.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about it's Christmas, let's bring all of our families to church, when I think really what we should be focusing on is who might feel alone this Christmas. Let's bring them to church, not just our families. Let's bring our families plus and find all those people who might be struggling, might be alone, might be hurting or mourning, and bring them back and show them, look, you don't have to have somebody to get presents from or to give presents to celebrate Christmas. You just need Jesus.
Well, that's, I think, when it comes down to when we were talking about the things we like the best, it wasn't about presents and stuff. It was about the time that we spend with people, time that we spend with loved ones. And that's even the tree, the Christmas tree was even there to help capture something that had to do with Christmas. Like when Martin Luther was out for a walk and he had the evergreen trees and he saw the stars shining through the trees and he thought that was so beautiful. So he brought a tree. Bringing a tree in the house was common, but he was the first one that put lights on it. He put candles on the tree so that it could be kind of like what he had seen outside that night. Yeah. And I wondered why he just didn't take his kids for a walk. Maybe it was too dangerous in the wintertime, to go for a walk like that because people get a cold and die, a lot more than they do now.
Yeah, you think Christmas lights are dangerous. Try putting candles all over your tree.
And that's what they did, literally. A lot of families still do. You can buy electric ones that clip on, but a lot of people still use real candles, but they only put them on like for a little while at a time.
Right.
And you'd be really careful and have a fresh tree. And most of the time, like in Germany, they set up the tree. A lot of the people, the tradition is you set it up on Christmas Eve.
Oh, really?
You put it up on Christmas Eve, you decorate, you put the candles on it, you light the candles, you sing Christmas carols, all on Christmas Eve.
At this point, it feels like that's what my family does, but not on purpose.
Not on purpose?
It just ends up being that way.
Well, it's funny. People talk about it all the time how Christmas just keeps getting sooner and sooner. I think it's just because people want to encapsulate whatever that is around Christmas, whether it be like coming together like as a family or like giving. And ultimately, we know that it's, there's probably like a spiritual thing going on around Christmas. It's not just like the material stuff doing that, but it's funny that like right after, even like in October now, it's like, well, get out the Christmas decorations. Like,
right.
It's November 1st. Let's get the tree up, and you can just tell people just need any amount of hope or happiness they can get, and Christmas does give that to them, but it's temporary.
It's temporary.
Right. The 26th happens, and
you get the post-Christmas blues.
So
what are those?
It's this feeling that I've noticed a lot of people, they talk about like, oh, well, now it's 364 days till Christmas. And they always are just looking forward and looking ahead when a lot of them I've noticed don't realize that Christmas, as in celebrating the birth of Jesus, you can celebrate Jesus every day of the year.
That's right.
It's just a lot of people, they don't realize where that joy comes from. And so they get that like feeling of sadness of like, well, now I have to wait a whole nother year for Christmas again. And so I just have noticed that.
Yeah, all of those things that people celebrate, when you ask people if they don't have Jesus, all those other things that they celebrate, none of those are really strong enough to be a good enough reason to celebrate. Something bad happens, like for instance, 10 years ago, and there's no reason to celebrate. They celebrate their family. That's the reason they celebrate. And then what happens? Mom and dad get divorced. Now there's no more family anymore, so there's no reason to celebrate.
Uncle Steve coming here being all political.
Yeah. Now if we pull back from Jesus, then we run the risk of having Christmas become something that's shallow and commercial.
Yeah.
And it's about Jesus. Jesus is the reason for everything. If we could help people to understand that it's all about Jesus, that celebration is the one that's going to go on. And the Christmas in the Philippines is great because they start celebrating in September, but it's not the same as here. It's not the same as commercially as here because the economy is not the same. The people are a lot poorer, but they're actually celebrating Christmas for all those months, from all through October, November, and December until after my birthday on January 5th. You mark that on your calendars. They're celebrating Christmas all of that time. And it was, it's just an amazing. I mean, in Germany, they celebrate for the whole month at least. They celebrate the 4 Sundays before Christmas, the Advent. The candles and everything. But the Philippines, they celebrate for months. And I think it's because that Christmas was such an amazing thing. It's like just having a week of that or a month of that, that's not enough. This is too important. We're going to celebrate Jesus a lot longer than that.
I think we should move to the Philippines. How's that sound?
They need doctors over there.
I'll be there.
Don't let Larry and Janet let them hear you say that because ooh.
So let's see here. For people that are watching, What's something that would be important for them to think about and for them to remember for this Christmas?
I would say that just like we said, there are good things about Christmas, but like I said, it can go upside down in an instant. Something can happen in the family, something financially. Financially, Christmas can be a super big stressful time. So it just having that same amount of faith and reflection on who Jesus is and what he's done for you and why we're ultimately celebrating Christmas, I think that's the best way to go. And once you have that on lock, then you can spread that you can go past yourself and spread that on to someone else. You're like, I'm blessed. This is not stressing me out this holiday. Even if things go back, I'm going to be fine because I have Jesus by my side. So I'm going to go spread that to somebody else, whether it just be like giving someone who's struggling like a dinner,
Right.
bring them dinner on Christmas or a present. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just like little things like that, helping out people who are in need.
And I think that was a lot of what I was going to say, but
That's why Troy went first.
that is why Troy went first. But I would say, kind of like what I said earlier, is if you do go to church on Christmas, instead of just bringing your family, think of somebody who might be alone or lonely or hurting or grieving and invite them. And if they have family, invite their family to come to church. And you don't have to make it about like, come to church with me so that you can come to church all year next year. Just say you don't ever have to come again if you don't want to, but let's spend this time together and show them that Christmas isn't necessarily about giving presents or receiving presents, although it feels great to be able to give a gift.
Yeah, it does.
But some people can't. And so just giving the gift of time spent with loved ones could make a huge difference in someone's lives.
Yep, that's right. Well, we're calling this podcast Connectivity, and that's one. From one way of looking at it, that is our job as Christians and in the church. Is that our job is to connect to Jesus, and then connect to each other in the church, but also be to connect to the whole world, to be connected. And when God made us that way, we're connected. We're humanity together, and most of the promises that God made were not to individuals. Most of them were to huge groups of people. God made promises to the nation of Israel. God made promises for the church. And there's many more promises that are for all of us together than for us individually. And if we can remember that, that it's not, for instance, that just that I'm created in the image of God. It's that we, people, humanity is the image of God. That when he created mankind, he breathed in and he created mankind in his image. It wasn't just the individual, it was all of us together. And a lot of times we could separate between like us and them. We've got us in the church that are the image of God, and them, they can be, but they're a bunch of wicked sinners and they need to repent. And we can hold up signs like people do at Comic-Con with signs that say God hates Deadpool and stuff like that. We're just completely silly. We're there to connect people and help people be connected to God. And Christmas is a great time to do that because this is when God reached into the world in a different way and Jesus was born and God's answer came into this world as flesh and blood. Jesus, that's the hope of everything. Emmanuel, God with us. And Jesus is here with us today. He's in our lives. He gave his life for us. He rose from the dead and he is alive. Out of all of the religions in the world, that are out there that have a person as someone to look to as the leader and the founder, Jesus is the only one out of all of those that's alive today. The rest of them, they're dead, they're buried, long gone, even though some of them might be reincarnated, they're still, it's not the same one, it's their spirit. Jesus is alive right now. And it's amazing. The Bible says that God is the God of the living. And so even though people that went before, they might have died, but they're still alive today. So that's what we're to do. Christmas time, connect. Find some way to connect. Help connect people to Jesus.
Yeah.
And be connected to each other.
Absolutely.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Testing 1 2. Hello. Hello.
Testing 1 2.
Welcome to Metrocity. Connectivity. And we're going to start over again because Dading said, wait, one more time.
Connectivity, the podcast where
That was your
we
notes. I'd
have
say
a
very
lot of
well
technical
prepared for the
difficulties and then make weird jokes. We're going to talk about God of War.
I am the most excited about the latest entry into the God of War franchise.
Ragnarok?
The Lego.
Oh,
I can't
Welcome
wait
to
play that.
Connectivity,
That's
a faith-based
totally what I wanna play.
podcast where we talk about video games.
I like that.
The Lego Star Wars games were amazing. Those
Yeah.
were the best Star Wars games ever.
The
I
new
think.
one. A new one came out. That's really good.
The new Lego Star Wars?
Yeah, it's totally different from the other ones. It's like over the
Banana.
shoulder. It's like third person almost.
You know what they need? They need to put that on Oculus so you can be the little Lego person running around.
Do, 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 do.